A key reason as to why Rashford is failing at Manchester United right now is because Ten Hag is tactically inept. The amount of space that Manchester United afford the opposition in the midfield is frightening, and this often leads to the opponent frequently finding space in between the midfield and the back line. And if this isn't down to Ten Hag being tactically clueless, then it's either as a result of poor communication between player and manager, or the squad's inability to listen to the instructions from Ten Hag, which doesn't help Rashford at all.
Exactly, because in a more structured team, he could thrive because he'd be giving clear instructions on what to do during certain phases of play, as at the moment this free roam role is clearly not working. Many teams will drop off, hit them on the counter-attack, meaning United tend to have more prolonged periods of attacking play. And when you compare that to last season, where they were predominantly a counter-attacking team, you can see why the tactics this season don't favour Rashford. It's because Rashford doesn't have a fully developed skill set. He is just a player who really thrives on space and behind. He's not the player who picks up the ball in between the lines and can almost knock the ball around and create a chance out of nothing when the game's tight. He likes that open play and that open space, which United had a lot last season and don't have much of this season.
And funny enough, he actually would be dangerous if he's playing against Manchester United. And that's actually very ironic because obviously, as we know, there's many Manchester United fans that may want Marcus Rashford out the club. So if he was to be out the club and if he did go to another Prem club, I think you could see a sort of an Alanga situation where, yes, he may not have been good at the club, but he could definitely exploit Manchester United in behind that defence.
And they'd be absolutely gutted if they saw Rashford just getting him on the break and scoring goals in behind, because they'd be like, why can't you do that for our team? Why can't you do that?
Yeah, it would be hilarious.
Another criticism of Marcus Rashford is his mentality, and aside from the tactics, does this have a big part to play in his downfall?
Well, his mentality is a crucial thing for when he does play well, because as we can see, he's nowhere near in the right state of mind, and we can see that when he's going out for drinks in Belfast, isn't it? So
Belfast or Dublin, and then he doesn't turn up to training on the match the next day. It's
awful, it's terrible, and we can see he's clearly not in the right state of mind, and he's definitely a confidence sort of base player.
He's a purple patch player.
In a way, yeah, because he relies on his confidence. For example, in the 21-22 season, he was terrible, he was awful.
Yeah.
But the following season, which was last season, in the 22-23 season, we've seen a completely different Rashford.
Last season, 17 goals, 5 assists in the league. This season so far, 5 goals and 2 assists.
Exactly.
And I know we're not at the end of the season, but he's not going to score 12 goals in the next 12 games.
And I think that's just his issue in terms of, I don't know what it is, but it's the fact that he relies, and it's what makes him not an elite player. It makes him a good player, but it's not an elite player when he's not someone who, I know this is a very extreme example, someone like Ronaldo who has got an elite mentality, and whether he's playing in bad form or good form, it doesn't matter.
And also, when your team is in a rut, they're in sort of a sticky patch in the game, he comes in clutch. Yes, he did do that last season, but this season, when United have been playing poor, they want to look to a player like Rashford, who's on like 350 grand a week. Can you score the goals that need us to win the game? If you look at someone like Salah, even when Liverpool weren't playing well, he was still there to score the goals when Liverpool were in a sticky period. And to be an elite player, you have to do that. You can't just be, I'll score when we're on top, or I'll score here, I'll score there. You've got to be scoring week in, week out, and in those big moments.
And I think it's also proved when Rashford actually played against Wolves last season, where he was on the bench, and he came on the pitch after he missed a team meeting. That's the reason I was on the bench. And he came on the pitch and was absolutely fantastic and won Manchester United the game, and that's because he had elite confidence. Whereas right now, if he is on the bench right now, and if he gets put on the bench, if that did happen, like I said with Ten Hag, if that did happen and he got put out the squad or put on the bench, then he'd be even worse than he is now, because he just relies on confidence. But if that situation happened last season where he was on a night out, got put on the bench, right?
He'd come on and score
a couple of goals. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that just adds to our further point of what we're saying about how he's just a confidence-based player, and that's what makes him a good player and not an elite player, and what many would call, like Zach, a purple patch player.
Also, it's not down just to can he score the goals in the big moments, can he perform consistently in terms of what he can do with the ball at his feet. It's also his work ethic. When Rashford is playing well, I'm not saying he's a pressing machine like a Mane when he used to play out on the left of Liverpool, but he still gets himself out about a bit more presses. It seems a bit more proactive off the ball. Currently, off the ball, he looks very lethargic, he looks lazy, and that's mentality. That has got nothing to do with your form. You could be in the worst form of your career. It's got no excuse for not trying and not putting in the high yards. And we did reiterate this in a video about Rashford a while ago, and it shows you that it's a frequent occurrence, and it has been throughout the season. So mentality, I think, is a big, big issue.
Yeah,
but then maybe if he had the right manager, if he was playing under a Klopp or Guardiola, systems aside, would he fit into the system? Ignore that. But in terms of having a manager who can maybe galvanise him, say to Rashford, we know your qualities, we can get the best out of you, would we then see him put in the hard yards, put in a shift? Because at the moment, if you were to pick up Rashford and drop him into a Guardiola or a Klopp system, he'd be straight out. He'd be straight subbed off for anyone on the bench, because he wouldn't try hard, And two, like we constantly keep on saying, he seems very tailored towards counter-attacking play, and I think he needs to develop that moving forward. And the main reason why I think Rashford has a limited skill set is because whilst being a Manchester United first-team player, he has constantly played under managers who haven't created a dominant side. None of the Manchester United managers have won a Premier League. None of the Manchester United managers have managed to build a team that wins 10, 15 games on the spin.
That's true.
And when you're winning 10, 15 games on the spin, you're going to dominate matches.
Yeah.
Very rarely do we see a manager win multiple games without dominating matches. And because Rashford is constantly playing under managers who are under the cosh all the time, who are constantly having to play against teams on the back foot and hit on the break, he's always played like that, and it's just become second nature. And also, whilst he's playing for England under Southgate, we know Southgate doesn't dominate teams either. So he's constantly playing on the break for England, constantly playing on the break for United. So he's never really had the time or the facilities to develop his game further, to adapt to play like a possession-based team like Guardiola, and to be able to play in a United team where they want to have the ball for prolonged periods and where they want to try and break the team down there and then, as opposed to just hitting them on the break and hoping for the best. And leading on from my point, do you think Rashford would be able to enhance his game and potentially flourish under a different manager who plays maybe a more possession-based style of play or a more structured style?
Potentially, and I think that philosophy of this new manager, or said manager that would come in instead of Ten Hag, it definitely depends on the style of play that they have. I mean, we don't know if Ten Hag's going to be gone at the end of the season, and we have no idea, in fact, who he's going to be replaced with. And if this new manager played a similar style to Pep or Arteta or De Zerbi, then I think we could actually see Rashford perhaps struggle, unless this new manager that does come in, unless he's got a reputation of improving football players, then perhaps he could help Rashford improve his skill set, and then that's where you could see Rashford flourish in a team that plays much more on the front foot. But if we see the Rashford that he is right now, playing in a system that's more on the front foot, then
seeing glimpses of it with Ten Hag, and it's clearly not working.
Yeah. However, if a new manager does come in and plays more of a pragmatic style of football, first of all, that's a very rare to see actually nowadays. You don't really see many managers playing defensive football.
Unless they're experienced coaches, not young ones coming through.
As I say, and also as much as Rashford would be a perfect player for them kind of systems, like Conte and Mourinho would love to have Rashford, those managers also have a big history of falling out with players, especially big players that are much bigger than Rashford as well. So I don't think we could see that work. And as we discussed, Rashford's mentality, Mourinho and Conte are ruthless. So if they
Although we did see Mourinho and Rashford almost sort of working intertwined.
Somewhat, in a way, yeah. But that's also why I think it may not work. Because if Mourinho comes back, I don't think it just
can you rekindle that relationship?
Not really. He's not really a Manchester United man. It's not like a Chelsea situation where the love's there. It wasn't really a love between United and Mourinho.
A lot of the players might think, oh, we're going backwards again.
Exactly. And then bringing in Conte, as much as he's not managed at United before, the same issue, you might fall out with players like Rashford, and he's had a history of falling out with big players, and I just don't see it working at all.
And ultimately, you're not going to build a project with him.
Exactly, and ultimately, you're not going to build a project with either of them two managers.
Although, if Rashford is anything like Grealish, there is light at the end of the tunnel, because as we saw at Aston Villa, Grealish was the main man.
Yeah.
He was a ball carrier, he was a dribbler, and he went to City, and that first season, he didn't really settle in quite right. He was developing his game, and as we saw in the second season, he was a new player. He wasn't a player before that was dribbling and taking on players all the time. He was a player that was, although he was being a ball carrier at City and was winning them a lot of free kicks, he was just knocking the ball around, playing that possession-based style of play a lot better. And yes, you may say Grealish is better suited because he doesn't have the same physical qualities of Rashford to run him behind. And also Grealish wasn't fading at Villa like Rashford is fading at United. So it will take a lot more to turn around Rashford's form and adjust his style of play and his skill set to tailor towards a manager who plays like Pep. But you can see that the opportunity is always there. As before Grealish went to City, he never really played in a style like Guardiola's. It was always playing at Villa, being the main man. And as Villa have never been a big team in recent years, they've never dominated games. So yeah, there is light at the end of the tunnel, as I said, for Marcus Rashford, if he wants to develop his game moving forward. And before we wrap up, is there any way that Marcus Rashford can improve his current form while still being managed by Erik ten Hag?
Well, if it's Ten Hag managing, then it's looking increasingly unlikely that he can improve that form. I mean, we've seen stints, maybe if he brings his confidence up, like we were saying earlier, then perhaps we could see Rashford definitely improve his form. But listen, I just don't see Ten Hag and Rashford working as it is right now. I mean, we've just seen it's been awful.
It's been a long time. Although he was excellent last season. Like, he was one of the best players in the league for a period. Since last August, he's been poor. It hasn't just been a few weeks or even a few months. It's been basically half a year. Yeah. I mean, Rashford will always have those moments where he can play well against the big sides, like against Liverpool or maybe City or Tottenham, because
and even Arsenal, because they play very high up and he has that moment of brilliance in him. But I think to see a sustained period of form from Rashford will be very difficult to see under Ten Hag. And I think the best thing for Rashford right now is actually what Zach was mentioning about earlier, about Grealish, about how he moved to a sort of a fresh environment. And I think Rashford should do the same. I think Rashford should...
That's a flip on it. That's a twist.
I think he should just move to a new club, because I think if he plays under that kind of manager, I think if you bring in a more possession-based manager under United, don't get me wrong, 100% definitely can work. But the issue is just how long he's been there for, and it's just sort of dragging out at Manchester United. If you put him in a new environment, it's really fresh, and there's just everything's new. I think Rashford can just thrive a lot more, because I feel like he'll look at this and go, "Ooh, it's a fresh start here. I can be a different player." And I also, because of the age he is as well, I mean, with Ten Hag,
hit those peak years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think he should definitely get a move while he can in his peak years. But also with the age he is, Ten Hag, I just don't see him improving his skill set, and especially, like I said, because of the age Rashford is, he's not young, so it's not like you've got to say, "Oh, give him time, maybe Ten Hag will help eventually prove him."
So a lot harder to mould players of his age than as a 21, 22.
Exactly. So to sum it all up, I don't really see Rashford improving his form under Ten Hag. But Zach, what do you think?
Well, personally, I think there is a slight glimmer of hope, only because I feel like, as United now brought in Jim Ratcliffe, and hopefully for their sake, not for mine, being a Liverpool man, they'll bring in a sporting director and their club will become a lot more structured. And then if Ten Hag is allowed to sign other players around Rashford that suit his system more, maybe we might see Rashford not necessarily flourish, but perform a lot better.
Yeah.
Because last season, although he was excellent, it felt like everything was revolved around him, playing balls for him.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at over the years at City and Liverpool, Salah and Mane, Sterling and Sane, Bernardo Silva and Grealish last season, everything was varied. Although Salah has always been Liverpool's top goal scorer whilst he's been at the club, Mane scored a lot of goals as well.
True.
Liverpool varied their attacks. Whereas last season, Rashford was so good, but everything was channeled down his side.
Yeah.
Everything was channeled towards him. So it's a lot easier because he's getting the bulk of the chances. So I think, if Rashford did end up flourishing, or at least sort of somewhat excelling at United, it would be down to the players he's playing around with, and maybe Ten Hag then being able to show his full quality as a manager. But if that doesn't happen, then a move elsewhere is probably best for him. Maybe even just to I know this might sound a bit dampening because he is a good player, but a lower level team that maybe plays more on the break.
Yeah.
Or, like Harvey said, a manager who is proven at improving players and developing players further, even at his age, which, although he isn't old, like we said, he's not at that age where he's the best shaped and the best fit for moulding.
I actually think Zach touches on a good point there, where Rashford, I don't think he's that kind of man that should be the main man in the front three, unless he's at a lower side team in the table. Like if he was at a lower side Prem club, then yes, maybe he should be.
Like a West Ham, for example.
Then I understand why he should be the main man. But if you want to see Rashford thrive in a Manchester United team, or a top European team, I don't think he should be that main man in the front three. I think he should be very similar to, like Zach was saying, Mane, who's just sort of a cog in the system, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like, if he wasn't there, the system wouldn't work very well, but he shouldn't be the main guy.
Although he was still getting 20, 30 goals a season, so was Salah, and he's getting more even. So.
Exactly, so that's the thing. So Mane was very, very key into the Liverpool system.
Really good player.
But like he wasn't like the be-all and end-all. He wasn't like Salah. He wasn't the main man.
No.
Whereas
for scoring goals, the main man.
For scoring goals, yeah, exactly. Whereas Rashford can be that exact kind of player. I mean,
work ethic is.
Yeah, I was about to say Mane's more complete in terms of his assets, and much more complete
positionally.
Exactly. He's much better, and he can play across the front three. Whereas Rashford's very only left wing centred. But I mean, I think Rashford definitely can become a better player if we maybe see Jim Ratcliffe bring in more quality players and bring in just a better team. And just have a much, much better system that Rashford can just flourish in, like Zach was just saying.
And the final point I want to make, which perfectly leads on from yours, is that I think Marcus Rashford now is starting to struggle with that expectation of being the main man. He's been at United now for the best part of a decade, and since he came through the ranks as a teenager, everybody's been looking at him and going, "You're going to be the next big man at this club who's going to win us Premier League, Champions League titles, FA Cups, Carabao Cups," and he hasn't fulfilled those expectations. I think now that's starting to weigh heavy on his shoulders. So I think if they were to obviously sign some players around him who would sort of take the weight off his shoulders and allow him to be his own player, but without having that, United haven't won today, what has Rashford done wrong?
Yeah.
Whereas they could go, what haven't United won today? What has he done wrong? What's he done wrong? What has Rashford done wrong? So it spreads the responsibility around. I think we could see him become a better player. And maybe with Højlund's resurgence in form,
that's true.
I know he's injured at the moment, but when he comes back, maybe he could be that man for United moving forward and take the weight off Rashford's shoulders. Because although I dislike the man, I think he has a poor work ethic, I do think There's barely any other players in the Premier League, maybe Trent Alexander-Arnold, who receives the amount of pressure and criticism from the media and from the general public like Marcus Rashford does. So yeah, that is always a variable there, is if he is playing in a better team with better players around him. But yes, there's always buts and maybes, but comment down below your thoughts on this man. Would he ever succeed under Erik ten Hag? Would he have to start a new chapter elsewhere? Or can he succeed at Manchester United, but with a new manager in place? It's all if buts and maybes, as I just said. But anyway, thanks for watching the video. Hit the like button and subscribe button for more content just like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.